Why did you want to be an astronaut?
In the late 60s, I was 7, 8, 9 years old. And what was going on in the news at that time that really excited a 7, 8, 9-year-old boy was the space race. The 2001, A Space Odyssey, that science fiction movie came out. And in reality, people were flying Gemini and people were starting to fly Apollo and starting to go to the moon. And the whole purpose of it, which was clear to everybody, was to put a human being on the moon by the end of the decade, within the 60s. And so as a kid growing up, it didn't matter where you were, whether you were in Malaysia or Canada or here in Houston, this is a pretty exciting thing. And it really captured my imagination. I had the National Geographic big picture of the moon above my bed on the wall, and I was watching the exploits. And on July 20th, 1969, like so many other people, I sat and looked at a bad, grainy little television and watched those first steps on the moon, and then went outside and with my family, but really alone, looked up at the moon and thought, that's what I want to do when I grow up. I'm going to grow up to be something. Why don't I grow up to be that? That is an interesting thing. That's a new challenge for humanity. But then when I look around, I'm thinking, I'm a 9-year-old kid and I'm a Canadian. What are my odds? Not very good. But I thought, well, up until yesterday, people couldn't even go and walk on the moon, and now they can, so maybe I can too. And so I started getting ready that night, basically started, what do I need to do next? And I need to learn to fly and to scuba dive and to stay in shape and other languages and study in university and all of those things, becoming an engineer and a fighter pilot and a test pilot and all of that, which was fun and fascinating, but also all to help maybe in the lifelong dream of having a chance to be an astronaut and to follow in the footsteps of Buzz and Neil. And amazingly enough, it worked.
Tell me a little of that story. Tell me about where you grew up.
I was born in Sarnia, Ontario, small town. It's where oil was pretty much first discovered in North America. And so it's an industrial town right on the Great Lakes. Beautiful little spot. And my father got hired by an airline when I was about 7 or 8. And then we moved to a farm closer to Toronto because he was flying for Air Canada based out of Toronto. So I spent my childhood basically in 2 towns. Sarnia for the first half of it, starting kindergarten and grade school there, and then Milton, Ontario, near Toronto, living on a farm for the rest of middle school and for high school. And my parents still live on a farm near Milton, Ontario.
How did that place and those people help make you the person that you are?
I've raised 3 kids. My wife and I have 3 kids. I've observed through direct contact that the adults that they are now is partially the product of where they came from and what we did, with them growing up, but partially how they were wired at birth. There are fundamental differences, and I'm sure I'm no different than my kids. I am born with whatever I was born with, what height I'm going to be and what color my eyes are and how my particular synapses all fire. But I'm also very much the product of the environment, my value system and the educational system that I went through, the people that I met, the people that inspired me or the people that oppressed me or whatever. I'm very much a product of all of that. And so any successes I've had, partially it's due to genetics, partially it's due to the people that have trained me and taught me and shaped me over the years. And I have lots of people that I could directly thank for helping get me to where I am today, for teaching me something critical or maybe teaching me something in general that helped me perceive things the way that I do. So I think if you want to grow up to be an astronaut, growing up as a kid in Southern Ontario is a pretty good place to come from.
Pick up the story from there for me and give me a thumbnail sketch of the big steps in your education and your career that have led you to be here at this point.
I went to a little tiny rural school called Percy W. Mary, and I was doing well in school. It was grade 3, 4. I skipped one of those grades. And fortunately, the Ontario educational system, the province of Ontario in Canada, had decided, at least this part of it, that they should have a sort of, at the time they called it enrichment, sort of like trying to pick out the kids that were doing real well and how to challenge them, how to maybe put them in a different educational environment so that they could really learn and be challenged. And I got into that program, and so for 3 years I was in an enrichment program, really teaching us to think more critically, think more analytically, think on a different scale than just getting these exercises done in time for this test. I went to a high school, 2 different high schools, and there was 2 different tracks, one a high school track to go to university and one not. And at the time you went to an extra year of high school if you're going to university. Nice preparation for the course that I decided to follow. I was a ski instructor. There's a great opportunity for outdoor activities in Canada, and to be able to have the combination of the natural environment and the physical challenges of downhill skiing and racing and being a ski instructor, for me, I learned a lot about managing speed and managing energy. I learned to fly as a teenager. There's a program in Canada called Air Cadets. It's sort of like the Civil Air Patrol in the United States, but it's a little closer to the Canadian Air Force. And they teach young Canadians, whether it's Sea Cadets, Army Cadets, or Air Cadets, they teach them a bunch of technical things. They teach them self-discipline. They give them levels of responsibility that they might not get otherwise as teenagers. And in my case, I spent one summer learning to be a glider pilot and getting my glider pilot's license. And right at the age of 16, I became a powered pilot. And a significant percentage of commercial pilots in Canada, something like half of them, went through Air Cadets. So it's a great program set up by the country that allows young Canadians to pursue an area of specialized interest that then makes them useful to the country later on. And then I went to our military academies, which in our case was called Royal Roads Military College and then the Royal Military College of Canada, RMC, studying engineering. And that's of course, if you're going to get into the Air Force or any phase of the military, you have 2 different ways. You can come in directly or you can come through the military college system. And I chose, I figured, well, the odds of being an astronaut are pretty lousy and I need something else as a real career. And so I decided I want to study engineering and then maybe I'll be able to be a pilot. And then maybe I'll be able to be a pilot as my profession for my whole life. And maybe I'll get to be an astronaut. And fortunately, all of those things worked out. But I would have been happy at each one of those stages as I worked my way through. And when I came out of military college, I was lucky enough to be able to do a master's work, graduate level work, and then go on to fly and be able to fly Canada's new fighter at the time, which is our version of the F-18. We call it the CF-18. I flew those for NORAD. Then I did exchange to the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School, and then flew as an exchange pilot, a Canadian flying F-18s with the U.S. Navy in Patuxent River. So that long, convoluted flow from an advanced education program as a 10-year-old kid or 11-year-old kid in the enrichment program in elementary middle school in Canada, all the way through to getting selected as an astronaut. I see myself very much a product of all of those structures and capabilities that Canada provided me.
To fly as an astronaut is to assume some risks that most people don't have in their lives. The question is why? What is it that you feel that we get or that we learn as a result of flying people in space that makes it worth taking the risk?
Almost everything worthwhile carries with it some sort of risk, whether it's starting a new business, whether it's leaving home, whether it's getting married, or whether it's flying in space. You are taking a risk. You are going from one known set of circumstances into a new set of circumstances. And everybody takes some of those risks during their life. It's a natural progression of maturity, of the desire to do something with yourself, the desire to have a measure of success and increased capability and increased comfort in your life. But also maybe the desire to be able to look back at your life and say, hey, I did something worthwhile in the time that I was alive. And that manifests itself all different ways in human behavior. People try and answer those questions to themselves, doing all different sort of things. I made the choice early on that what I thought was important was technical. I think it's important to push back the level of what we can do technically, and I chose aerospace. And so as a fighter pilot, I helped defend North America using the latest of aerospace technology. But that wasn't where I wanted to end up. I wanted to then get into aircraft design and testing and try and make airplanes safer, make airplanes more capable. We burnt a hydrogen-fueled engine, a super hypersonic hydrogen-fueled engine on the wingtip of an F-18, trying to understand how to build a vehicle that could get you across the Pacific in an hour. Doing high angle of attack testing of F-18s, trying to make airplanes that could fly where airplanes could never fly before. That was really interesting to me, and it was risky. I lost a good friend a year for 10 years as a fighter pilot and a test pilot. I knew that it was risky. My wife knew that we go to funerals on a fairly regular basis of people that are just doing their job. But you can't make that omelet without breaking some eggs. You cannot do it. You have to be able to take some risks. Some things are worth taking a risk for. Even if you decide, okay, I'm going to spend my whole life sitting at my kitchen table and going in between there and my bed and hiding from risks, you know, your house, eventually the ceiling falls down. There's an earthquake, or there's a hurricane, or there's a lightning storm, or a tornado, or whatever. You know, there's no guarantees. You may as well try and do something worthwhile in the meanwhile and minimize the risks where you can. And for me, space flight is just the natural extension of all of that. We, for the first time in history, if we muster all of our best of capabilities, we could just now safely start to leave the Earth, to go away from our planet. And to be part of that, to be able to be one of the early explorers that is opening the capability of leaving Earth is fundamentally interesting to me, but I also judge it as a very worthwhile thing. It's an important thing in this stage of human development, like the first sailboats that left land, or the first vehicles that could drive safely and conveniently on the surface, or the first airplanes. We're at that level, and I've wanted to be a part of it my whole life. I've devoted 20 years as an astronaut, and now there's risk involved, but I'm going to fly a Russian spaceship as the left seater, sort of like the co-pilot or whatever, up, and then live on a space station for 6 months. And yeah, we might die in the effort, but I might die driving home from work tonight. And I'm going to manage things as best I can so that I live a long and healthy life, but a long and healthy and worthwhile life.
You're about to launch to the International Space Station for expeditions 34 and 35. Chris, tell me, what are the goals of this flight, and what are your jobs going to be on this mission?
The space station is there for a purpose, and that is to do science that can't be done on the surface of the Earth. That is the core purpose of the space station. And so our job, as the people on board, is to make sure that that science gets done. Everything else is sort of downstream of that. Yes, we need to fix things as they break. Sometimes we have to go outside on spacewalks. Sometimes we have to use the robot arm and grab a new delivery truck that's full of equipment. But the core of it is to run those 100, 110 experiments that are running on board. And that's our main job, to be the lab technicians, as well as the plumbers and the delivery men and all the rest of it. But really, the lab technicians that keep the International Space Station as the big international laboratory that it is.
Now, you didn't do any of that the last time you visited the International Space Station. What are you looking forward to at the station on this trip?
On my first space flight, I went to the Russian space station Mir and built a piece of it using Space Shuttle Atlantis. The second space flight went to the early, small International Space Station and built a piece of it using Space Shuttle Endeavour. And both times, I thought, wow, I wish I could stay. You know, what a desirable thing to do in life, to be able to leave Earth and not just go build something and come back, but to leave Earth for a while, change your zip code for a while, and really become a resident. And both places, I just felt so jealous of the experience as we undocked and left. And this time, after a lot of lucky coincidences and a lot of hard work, now I get to be one of those crew members that stays for an extended period away from the planet. And it's been a long road getting there. It's been a huge amount of qualification necessary to get there, a lot of luck to get there. But for me, it's really a culmination of all the things that I've done for the last 20 years as an astronaut. And I'm really looking forward to not just visiting space, but moving to Earth orbit and having all of the internal changes and the understanding and the revelation that comes with that. I'm really looking forward to it.
During your time there, you're going to have a number of crewmates, some who were there before you, some who will arrive later, two of them that you're going to be there with the whole time, and one of them, Tom Marshburn, you've already flown with, although it was underwater on a NEMO mission. Has the experience of that mission, working with that crewmate, helped you guys prepare for this flight?
I count myself hugely lucky to be flying with the group of people, the group of humans that I'm flying in space with. I've known all of them for a long time. Some of them, gosh, Pavel Vinogradov and I trained together for a Mir flight back in the early 90s. He came over to my house. I gave him his first jet ski ride back in about 1994. So we've been training together for a long time. Tom and I have climbed mountains together as part of outdoor leadership school. As you say, we've lived at the bottom of the ocean together. And through all of that, what's important is shared experience. If you're going to take a small group of people and ask them to do something that is really complicated or has really high stakes and potential for really complex things to happen, then it is great to have had a shared experience in advance and as deep and representative an experience as possible. When something hard happens, if you can look at each other and go, well, you know, remember back when we saw this before, or remember when we were out jet skiing together, or remember when we were living in the bottom of the ocean, that really gives you a foundation to build upon and to rely on, and a shared confidence in your ability to deal with the unknown. And so I think the process by which we select astronauts and cosmonauts, the way we train together, not just the technical training, but the psychological and the interpersonal training that we get is a really important and vital part of being successful in spaceflight.
Anytime you make a space flight, you're going to miss certain things on Earth. On this flight, it turns out you're going to be away for Christmas and New Year's. What are your thoughts about spending those holidays in space?
My family lives all around the world. I have a son who lives in China, a son who lives in Germany, and a daughter who lives in Ireland. And my wife is back and forth, United States and Canada. So really, we get together once a year for a big holiday. The Christmas holiday is when we get together. This year we've decided to bump it up a little, and we're going to get together for Christmas in Kazakhstan. Makes a nice card. Christmas in Kazakhstan. That's where we'll be this year. So we're going to celebrate it a little early. On the actual day, the traditional day, the 25th, of course, it'd be like the times when I was working here in Houston in Mission Control on Christmas Day, which I did several times. Or it'll be either we'll shift the date, or I'll phone in, or I'll have a video conference, or talk to each of my family members all around the world. It's an understood part of the job. This is a very special year for us as a family, and everyone understands that it's not going to be normal, and this will be a year, even though it's not typical, a year to talk about for the rest of our lives.
I want to get you to set the scene for me. Tell me about the International Space Station that you're going to arrive at. Tell me what's there now. What are the modules and the different facilities there that are there to support you and your crewmates, your mission, and yourselves?
So you're in a spaceship, and you wake up, and in the far distance you see a star. And it's like almost miraculous in that all the other stars stay the way they are, but this one star, as you approach it, gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it stops being a point of light and starts becoming this three-dimensional thing. And the closer you get to it, the more you're sort of staring at it in incredulity and fascination, because it turns into this big bug of appendages and things sticking out, and then it becomes enormous. And then it's the size of a small town that you are approaching, and it's huge. And I felt that way coming up to Mir. I felt that way coming up the station even when it was small. And now, from our little Soyuz looking out the window to come to station as big as it is now, with as we'll see it, of course, the Japanese module and the European module, and all the American segments up the middle, and then all of the Russian segments in the back, and the huge truss and the huge solar arrays. It's a place away from Earth that humans have built. It's truly a big outpost, or a big first great landing in another part of the universe, and it feels miraculous to sneak up on one of those and to find it in space, and then drive ourselves in and dock with our little spaceship, equalize pressure, open the hatch, and go into this thing. It's every science fiction book. It's every Arthur C. Clarke's imagination of what the orbital module might look like as you come up. And it's this little astronaut kid's dream to be able to do that. It's a massive, capable human creation orbiting the world, and I'm really looking forward to opening that hatch.
One of the pieces that was invaluable in putting that together is Canadarm2. That's a hunk of technology that you delivered to the space station. Tell me what else is still to come for for Canadian robotics in the station, for Canadarm and Dexter and other things that are still in the pipeline.
The space station, as far as construction goes, is almost finished. There's a Russian laboratory to come up, and there are other piece parts to go on, but fundamentally it's built. That was job one for Canadarm2. To grab things out of the back of the shuttle or to hand off from the shuttle's arm to the Canadarm2, take them around, build the station incrementally like a huge Meccano set or a huge Lego set, getting bigger and bigger. But that crane phase for the Canadarm, that construction phase, is pretty much finished. Now, it's really just an extension of ourselves on the outside. When we need to go out and look at something, it's nice to have a camera on the end that you can go have a good close look at something. When a new spaceship comes up, we reach out, some of them of course, and there are several different types going on during our increment. Reach out, grab one, take it around, plug it in, and help deliver all of the equipment to station, and then return them back to Earth or get rid of them again. And then also, of course, like a cherry picker or like a Wichita lineman, sometimes you need to go out and go fix something and you need to use both hands. And so with the Canadarm2, as a spacewalker, you can click your feet into the foot restraint and the arm can drive you around as if you were a tool on the end of a surgeon's probe, and then it'll get you exactly where you need to do, as Sonny and Aki did recently in fixing the big electrical box on the outside of Space Station. The arm is just a wonderful extension and tool for us to be able to work on the outside of the space station. So the arm, Canadarm2, continues after having helped build the station all the way through, now continues to keep the station vital and capable, and maybe most importantly, when something comes up with new experiments and fresh food and clean clothes, that's what we do the grabbing and installing and have our Christmas morning with as a result of Canadarm2's work.
You've mentioned that the assembly of the station that has taken over 10 years, pretty much done, and the focus now is turning on to science. How do you explain to people what the potential is for what kind of science return the station can provide?
Having a laboratory like the space station functions on two different levels. One is the obvious one, and that is that you have a laboratory with basically no gravity. You can then do experiments that are impossible anywhere else. Well, no, maybe you could go to the top of a building and drop your experiment and it falls, and the time that it's falling, it's sort of weightless. Or we do that, we drop it down old mine shafts so it can fall, a couple thousand meters maybe. But that's only a short period of seconds, and there's still the air drag slowing it down. You can put it in the back of an airplane and maybe get 20 seconds of good weightlessness. On the space station, we have perpetual absence of gravity, basically. And so there's all sorts of experiments that you can do on space station that you can't do anywhere else. And that is the fundamental core of it. But the other part is there are some things that are just fundamentally exciting to people. And one of them is exploration and leaving Earth. To be able to do this thing that is new in the human experience is fundamentally exciting. When I sit next to somebody on a bus or in an airplane and they find out that I'm one of the humans that leaves Earth, that's all we talk about from then on, because no matter who they are, this is an interesting thing. This is new in the human experience. This is something that is sort of joyous and exciting to hear about. And as a result of that, it brings people together. That fundamental shared excitement of something new in humanity's experience, no matter where you're from, it brings people together. And so it doesn't just bring astronauts together or people on the bus together, but it brings scientists together and researchers. And so not only have we built a place where you can do experiments with no gravity, where we have lots of electricity, lots of time, a really good environment, but also it challenges and it inspires people from all around the world to try and use this new experience, to bring them together, to get people from one corner of the world talking to people from another corner of the world, that without this shared new capability and challenge, they would never have spoken to each other. And so it functions on both those levels, and we see it every day on board station, and a lot of the work that goes on is the daughter or granddaughter of that type of great harmony of environments.
Let's talk about some of that research. One of the areas that station research focuses on is finding out how being in that environment affects the human body and what we can do to counteract the bad effects. Tell me about 2 or 3 of the human life sciences investigations that you're going to be involved with.
If you're going to do experiments on a space station, some of them, of course, are going to be just taking advantage of the lack of gravity. Some of them are going to be to look at the world, some to look at the universe, some to test equipment, but some of them just look at things that are different because there's no gravity. One of the big differences is how does a human body function when you take away gravity? Some of it's obvious. When you swallow your food, it doesn't sit in the bottom of your stomach, it floats around. When you are floating inside the station, your balance system doesn't know which way's up. You don't stand up and your body never has to push the blood back up to your head again. You can be so lazy in space, you don't even have to hold up your head. You know, for 6 months, you don't have to hold your head up. That's how lazy you can be. And so the resulting changes in the human body are one of the things that we study. A couple of the experiments we have on board, one is called vascular, and it's looking at what happens to the cardiovascular system when you live in an environment like that. The heart actually shrinks. It's like aging on a rapidly accelerated scale. Your heart actually shrinks, and your blood vessel response changes, and it actually sets us up to cardiovascular problems. If you had something that was pretty low grade on Earth, after 6 months of an environment like that, a risk of a heart attack or a stroke might actually be quite a bit higher. And so we have a sequence of experiments that's taking blood samples and monitoring our body while we're exercising and doing different things to try and understand what's going on with our cardiovascular system. But it also challenges people to try and do the science in orbit. And we have an experiment called microflow that what used to be a big piece of equipment installed in a hospital, they were trying to figure out how can we actually sample the crew members' blood while they're in orbit and get looking at the individual cellular level. And they, as a result, have got it down to the size of a toaster. You know, it's like Tony Stark in Iron Man, where he's trying to see if that thing in his chest has made his blood radioactive, and he puts this little thing in and tests his blood and looks at it. Now on orbit, we have a thing, sure, it's the size of a toaster. It's not quite movie grade yet, but we can take a blood sample, just a tiny amount of blood, and using an optical system that was very recently developed, just a little bit of blood goes through there, and it can give us results in blood analysis within 10 minutes. And there's a capability driven by an opportunity, driven by a set of circumstances that then, of course, has great opportunity on Earth. If you can now do blood work with a very small machine, then remote communities can do it, and food processing factories can do it, and so it's taking this challenge and some of the limitations of what we're doing, coming up with a new product, and then realizing that, hey, this is going to be good all over the place. And that's a piece of hardware we'll be testing on our crew. There's a lot of orthostatic stuff as well. The final piece I want to talk to you about is the aging process is so rapid, or at least it resembles the aging process so rapidly for astronauts in space. The loss of loss of bone and the loss of muscle strength. It's as if you spent months or years, even decades on Earth, happening in just a few months in orbit. And using changes in exercise and changes in diet, we have basically found a way to beat that type of aging, beat that type of osteoporosis. And so that we can have crews that used to come back with significant bone loss and now come back basically with no bone loss at all. This is, of course, really important if we're going to leave Earth and go to an asteroid or go to Mars. We don't want the person to show up on Mars as a jellyfish. Basically, they have to show up and be able to put on their spacesuit and go out and explore the surface. Or if after 6 months on station you have an emergency spacewalk, you need to be strong and fit with a good skeleton to go fight the suit and work outside. And also, of course, on Earth, for the people that are naturally aging and that are getting osteoporosis and muscle wasting, for certain types of that at least, here is a combination using specific resistive exercise, a regimen of exercise, and a specific type of diet that we have proven in this environment that will allow an astronaut to stay healthy for the full 6 months, and therefore improving health of people on Earth, but allowing us to go further out into the solar system.
The station is also packed with a lot of specialized gear for science research in other scientific disciplines too. Give me a couple of examples of the different kinds of other science you're going to be working on.
You know, we don't know what the universe is made of. Strangely enough, we've been looking at it, looking up at the sky, you can see things, but we really fundamentally are just discovering that we don't even really know what the universe is made of. If you measure how fast stars and galaxies are moving away from each other, the gravitational pull numbers, it all doesn't make sense unless you say there must be something out there causing these other effects, and we call it dark matter and dark energy. And also, by all of our theories, there should have been the same amount of matter and antimatter created at the beginning of the universe. And so, how are you going to figure that out? It's hard down here on the surface. The atmosphere filters most of that information. So we decided a little over a year ago to mount on top of the space station a huge magnet, a 7-ton magnet up on the top of the space station that collects the matter, the tiny little particles of the universe. And it's already processed 32 billion different particles from the universe. And with all of the sensors that are, it's called the alpha magnetic spectrometer. And all of the different sensors that are in it are now trying to understand what is the stuff of the universe. You know, what are the origins of it, and therefore what's the future of it, and what is our place in it. And that's a really hard thing to do on the surface of the Earth. It's even hard to do on a satellite. But the station is a huge, powerful, stable platform above the atmosphere for decades. And so it's a great place to mount a long-term sensing experiment like that. We have also a sensor on the outside looking at X-rays, looking at all of the X-ray sources in the universe, trying to understand black holes and some of the less visible stars out in the universe. On the inside, without gravity, heat doesn't rise. Seems simple, but it's hard to get your mind around what that means. If you put a pot of water on a hot plate, it doesn't boil right because you don't get cold water at the top and hot water at the bottom, that then the heat rises and causes nice convection patterns. So what happens if you take a tube of water on the space station and you heat one end? You know, does the water just get warm at this end and stay cold down here? Well, there was an Italian physicist, Marangoni, who realized that surface tension, you know, if you take a glass of wine and you swirl your glass of wine around and you see how it sort of sticks, the legs of the wine, how it sticks to the wine glass, that's the surface tension, the viscosity of the wine. Well, that viscosity changes with temperature. And so if you have a tube of water and you heat one end, the Marangoni effect, the viscosity of the water changes as you heat it. So in fact, the water starts to move around due to an entirely different process than we normally can see on Earth. And it may sound pretty esoteric. Of course, you can make a much bigger tube of water. You can study it in space. You just can't study it on Earth. Sounds esoteric, but if you start thinking about it, you can then study all sorts of fundamental fluid physics that we just can never study on Earth. We can look at how stars form, because here we have an environment with particulate in it, just like little bits of matter in the universe, and get it spinning and see how those things behave over time, how they flow with these Marangoni currents. We can design a blood sensor with just a tiny, tiny little bit of blood, a pico drop of human blood, but because we understand due to the Marangoni forces how it will flow, we can then take a tiny blood sample and just using the viscosity of it, move it around and sample it. So that's an application for here on Earth. Or something as typical as welding. You know, when you're welding something, it's not just gravity that's moving the liquid metal around, but it's a lot of those Marangoni forces, the viscosity forces as you melt the flux and the metal all together. And we can better understand how welding works and improve quality of welding. So the space station is it is this incredible, unique laboratory, an environment that has been really hard to build. But we've created this thing, and so many of the leading minds of the world, right up to Nobel laureates, are using that capability up there to push further back into our understanding of fundamental processes and where we are in the universe.
And for the crew, you're not only there to help run those experiments, you're there to make sure that the station continues to operate so that those experiments can run. What do you do during a day? What's a crew member's day like on board the station?
For the people that have been out on a sailboat or on a ship for a long time, where you get out of sight of land, you're there for some purpose. Maybe you're transporting equipment somewhere. Maybe you're going to do research. You're going to go look at coral reef life. Or maybe you're just out for a day's sailing and you want to get a tan or go visit or just have a nice time. Well, part of your day is to do what you went for. Part of the day is to look at the coral reef or to lay back and look at your tan. But part of the day is getting the sailboat ready when you're about to take it out of harbor. Part of the day is operating the sailboat. You got to steer it. You got to get the sail trimmed right. You have to pay attention. Things break. Your compass starts sticking, or your radio doesn't work, or the toilet in the sailboat isn't working properly. Part of your day is going to be that. And then part of your day is just taking care of yourself as a human being. You need to sleep, you need to eat, you need to wash, all those things. Space station's exactly the same. You spend part of your day just being a person. You wake up in the morning, take care of all of your typical morning activity, have breakfast, try and read the news, use the toilet, get yourself cleaned up, maybe exercise. We don't get exercise for free on the space station just by walking around or raising our arm or picking up water. You don't fight gravity ever, so therefore you can be so lazy, and you have to deliberately exercise. Sort of like if you were living on a boat, you got to deliberately exercise. And then part of your day is fixing things. It's a big, complicated structure, and things break. And so part of the life of an astronaut is fixing everything from a cord in the back of a laptop that has stopped working, through to the air purification system, or maybe something as huge as going outside to replace or repair a big piece of the station that is broken. And then part of the day is running the experiments on board, which is the real core purpose of being there. And your days are divvied up just like that. Every day you're a human being staying alive, you're a technician keeping the space station alive, and you're a scientist doing research.
When you arrive on the Soyuz spacecraft, you're going to join the International Space Station crew as a flight engineer. But in the midst of your mission, when Expedition 35 begins, you're going to become the commander of the International Space Station. How's that change life for you?
I'm lucky enough to be able to spend 6 months, just a little under 6 months on the space station. Long time, 6 months. A lot of things can happen, a lot of days in a row. And for the first half, which I count myself really lucky, is that I don't have to show up there and be in charge. I show up and the commander will be Kevin Ford. And what a great opportunity for me to learn, because eventually I'm going to be asked to command the space station, but I don't have to jump in and be full speed and running and take over right away. I can do a bunch of on-the-job training. I can fleet up, as they say in the Navy. And so I can do my job, be a flight engineer, answerable to the commander, listen to all the ways that Kevin has decided, and of course Kevin is learning them from Sonny Williams, who learned them from Gennady Padelka, so there's this long pedigree of refined and proven ways to do things that are never going to be seen properly here in our simulators. There's always subtle differences. So I will have on the order of 3 months to really learn how Kevin's running things and look at it, okay, if I were the commander, I would do that, I would do that differently, I wouldn't do that, and I'll be able to pick and choose so that come March, when it's time for Kevin and his crew to get into their Soyuz and go home, he and I will have a ceremony on board, salute each other, and from that moment on, the health of my crew, the health of the space station, and all of the things we're trying to do productively are all resting on my shoulders, weightlessly, but they're resting on my shoulders. And so I need to be ready for that. I've been training with that in mind for several years here on Earth, working to build the crew, working to make sure we have the skills, but also the the relationship that would allow us to be healthy and productive during that time, and also making sure that I understand things well enough. No matter what breaks on the station or no matter what experiment's going on, I have to have some understanding so that I can make the right decisions, the right operational decisions as things happen during the 6 months. And at this stage of my career, in my 50s, I've been an astronaut 20 years, I've flown a couple times, I consider it a huge lucky break, a huge privilege, because I've been gathering experience. I've been trying to see how to do these things well. I've been learning from other people. And now to be given the opportunity to command what is essentially the world's spaceship, now at this stage of my career, I consider a great responsibility, but also a great turn of events and a great challenge and opportunity for myself. And I'm really looking forward to it.
You're also going to be the first Canadian astronaut to command the space station. What's it mean for Canada and Canada's space agency to have a commander?
Canada had its first spacecraft go to orbit 50 years ago. It was called Alouette. We were the third nation on Earth to have a satellite in space. We did it cooperatively. It was on an American rocket, but a Canadian satellite. So it kind of laid the grounds for how we're doing everything. We have some specialty back home in Canada. We have a set of our own interests, in this case the upper atmosphere and the northern lights and living in the north. And we had a need, we had a capability, we cooperated with another nation, and we got ourselves into space. So we've been in the game from the beginning. And right sort of on the accomplishments of Alouette 1, that very first satellite, Canada has almost linearly built our capability and our responsibility and therefore our international respect over time. We went from that to sensing satellites, telecommunications satellites, RadarSat, the first Canadian to fly on the shuttle, Canadarm, which was on the shuttle, which did so many things from the Hubble telescope to all of the satellites it grabbed and released. And then with the other arm, of course, now onto the space station. We've had Canadians go from Marc Garneau, our first, who was a payload specialist back in the early 80s, through to Julie Payette, who was the main flight engineer running the space shuttle during her last flight, and then Bob Thirsk, who lived on station as a flight engineer. And even though it's, no one could map it out on purpose that way, it has appeared fairly linearly and progressive to now where Canada is in a position to have a Canadian command the International Space Station. And each has been a door opening of possibilities for young Canadian kids. This is something you can do. This isn't just a dream, but this is an actual career choice. This is a thing that can happen in your life. And as a result, this is a big deal in Canada. This is a brand new capability. It's something to be proud of. It's something to look at in perspective of time. Look backwards and see how we got here. Look forwards and see, hey, look where this is going. We're going to other planets eventually, and Canada is part of this. And so I feel the responsibility of that as the first Canadian to do it. Fundamentally for me, it's the first time for me regardless, so it's a big deal for me, but also it's a big deal for my country, for my space agency, and for where I'm from. And so I'm happy that people are interested in it, but I'm fundamentally happy that this is a continuation of all of those capabilities, and it continues to open opportunities for the Canadians that follow after me.
What will it mean to you to have been that Canadian who was first?
I hate to jinx something by talking about things in advance because I would like things to go well. That's been my goal for a decade, really, of preparing for this flight, of getting myself in a position to try and do this job well. And I want to come back, since the outset I've said I want to come back with a healthy crew, with a crew that sort of my measure is, would they want to go do this again right away? And if they want to go do this again, then it was a good human experience. I want to come back with a healthy space station, and I want to come back having done as much of the science as we possibly could in our 6 months on the station. Those are my objectives: health of the crew, health of the station, and as much of the objectives as we could get done. And if through luck and the work of the crew we get all those things done, then of course this is one of the pinnacles of what I was asked to do during my life. This is a big event for me personally, and it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of focus, but it deserves it. and I'm really working hard and hoping that when we land at the end of May, that I'll be able to look back and say I did what I set out to do, and I handed the station off to Pavel Vinogradov in as good a state as I possibly could, and it's something that I can look back on as an accomplishment and a threshold of my life that was really important for me.
Anyone who has taken a look at your biography sees that among many interests that you have, music is one of them, and you've got some special music plans for this mission. Tell me about your plans for recording music and a sing-along with students all across Canada.
On board the space station, there's a Canadian guitar. It's a Larrivée made in Vancouver. That's just luck. I didn't get the guitar up there, but it turns out when they bought one in a local guitar shop here in Houston, they ended up buying a Larrivée, which is great. It's a nice guitar. I play guitar in a couple bands and sing. I've fronted bands here in Houston for 20 years, and it's just a natural extension for me to play music no matter where I am, whether it's in Star City or Scuba Japan or on board the space station. I played guitar on board Mir when I was there back in 1995. And I thought, since I'm there long enough, why not write music about the experience of traveling in space? The early sailors, the early miners, the early cowboys, the pioneers that moved into a new human environment, all of them have recorded the experience not just in journals, but also in song and in music. And to be able to use that new environment to help inspire art in the form of music is a way that I thrive on Earth. I'm not by any means the world's best musician, but I love it. And I had lots of people to play music with. And to be able to do that on space station is fairly new in the human experience, and I want to make the most of it. You can record it lots of different ways. You can write a journal, a blog every day. You can take 1 million photographs out the window. You can, try and capture this new human experience different ways. For me, music is a great way to do that recording. I've half written a bunch of songs. I've completed some songs. I've made sure that we have the equipment on board, not just the guitar, but the right combinations of pickups and microphones and recording equipment and files and how to get it down to the ground and all that, so that we have a reasonable recording studio on the International Space Station. I'm going to have the chance to float weightless inside the cupola with the world rolling by underneath, playing a guitar, inside probably the most scenic recording studio that's ever existed, and a chance to record the songs that I have written and to work and write new songs or expand the songs while I'm up there. And then afterwards, for the rest of my life, to have those as my souvenirs, my memories of living away from the Earth. And my brother, who I write songs with, said, imagine if the first people going to Mars, if when they sit around their mess table on the 6 months on the way to Mars and they sing old space songs, and one of the songs they sing is something that you wrote on board the space station, a space shanty or whatever, what a interesting idea, and it's not inconceivable. So I'm really looking forward to that. Playing music in space also attracts a lot of interest from other musicians. Lots of musicians of all different levels, right up to some pretty famous bands, have said, "Hey, we would love to play with you while you're up there, or record something, and we'll incorporate you into our concert," or something like that. And so I've been looking at what's the best way to do that. One of them is with schools across Canada. How do you get involved with all the grade school and high school bands across the country? And there are a couple good programs that exist. One is called Music Counts. And they try and have one Canadian celebrity song a year that is then learned by the school choirs and played during the year, and it's themed for the year or some sort of particular theme. This year they decided to make a space theme. And they teamed me with one of the musicians in the Canadian band called Bare Naked Ladies, a guy named Ed Robertson. Ed's a great songwriter. He's from the part of the world that I'm from. And so we've been working together for about a year now on a song. And actually this week we just recorded sort of the final version of the song. And it will be put into full orchestrated form and sent to schools so that the high school bands all have their particular, the third trumpet has his part to play and the whole thing put together. Choirs will learn the words. And then I will be recording a part of it on the space station as well and sending it down. And there will then be a way to have the Bare Naked Ladies version of it with me adding in harmonies and singing verses or whatever and playing a little bit of guitar. And then at school concerts throughout the school year, they will be able to play along with us. They'll be able to use our recording, our music, or even conceivably the whole thing happening live or partially live with my recording and Ed Robertson and company. And it's a really nice way, a different way, to tie the newness of the experience and the imaginative part of the experience with people all across the country. And it's a real privilege to be part of that.
Sound like it'll be fun.
Yeah, oh yeah, it'll be fun too.
Any increment on the space station the plan has to remain flexible to respond to things as you made reference to earlier. Sometimes that means going outside. What is, as we speak today, what is the plan for spacewalks during your time on board?
We have a richness of experience in our crew, people who have done multiple spacewalks in the past, both on the Russian side and on the U.S. side or the Canadian side. And so we've been training for years to do spacewalks. And there are all sorts of things that we have looked at and said, if this fails, we have to go out and do a spacewalk within this number of days to go fix it. Electrical things or cooling things or something like that. And so we're ready to go do those. But right now, as of today, there is nothing broken on the space station that will absolutely black and white hard require us to go outside. But sort of like maintenance on your car, it's going, well, I think I can get another 100 miles out or another 1,000 miles out before I have to change the oil or get the air conditioner fixed or whatever. Well, another 1,000 miles go by and you go, maybe another 500. There's a lot of things on station like that too. You don't want to replace things that don't need replacing, but there is some sort of regular maintenance required to keep a machine running. And unlike your car, where if it breaks, you can just pull over to the side and call AAA or call a tow truck. If the station has a serious problem, we have to continue to live and survive up there. And so it's a real balance, juggling, guessing game as to when you have to go outside and fix things. So we're trying to make sure that the crew can go outside and do any of the spacewalks we may be asked to do. Everything from something minor like retrieving a payload, the Missy payload that is collecting particles of the universe. It's been out there collecting them for years. We could fold that up like a big suitcase and bring it inside. That would be a good thing to do. There's cameras and lights outside that have failed that decrease our capability to see what we're doing. Some of those need to be swapped out. There's covers that need to go on certain parts of the station to improve and lengthen their life because of all the thermal cycles and the micrometeorite damage. There's a big, long shopping list of stuff we really should do as soon as we get outside and have the spare time, like doing maintenance on your house. I got to clean out the gutters. That can wait a little while, but the next time it rains, it's going to be a mess. That's kind of the boat we're in. So as a crew, we're trained, we're ready, and we're optimistic that something will break.
The landscape of spaceflight is changing these days. Now we got private companies even flying supply ships to the space station and all the different countries in the world working together instead of competing. Is this the kind of arrangement that you see continuing on into the future of human space exploration?
Space travel is hard. It's easy to do if you're willing to kill people regularly. Like in the early days of aviation, planes crashed all the time. People got injured. It was sort of, it's a risky business. Okay, people are going to die. That's not acceptable in space travel. We want to have because of the complexity of it and the cost of it and the visibility of it, we want it to be safe as we possibly can. And therefore, it takes a lot of preparation and it's expensive and it's rare. And when something takes a lot of preparation and is expensive and rare, it's hard to do as one person, it's hard to do as a small group or even as an individual company, sometimes even as a nation. I mean, Canada has not decided to launch their own people into space because of the complexity and the cost. We would rather share the cost with another country or another group of countries in order to make it as economically logical as possible. And the whole world is doing that for the International Space Station, or at least 15 of the leading nations of the world. That makes sense. If we had some huge breakthrough in engines so that suddenly getting to space was just as easy as driving to the corner store, if you could just have your Back to the Future little thing on top of your car where you throw in a banana peel and you're off to space, the whole game would be different, and people would be going all the time. But it is still complex and hard and dangerous and expensive. And so for the foreseeable future, it is going to be an international, both at the business level and at the governmental level, an international venture to build and live on the space station, to go to the moon, to go to asteroids, to go to Mars. And I think it's the right thing to do. I think as a species, as a shared group of people living on the surface of this planet, it makes sense, if we're going to leave it and go somewhere else in the solar system, that we should try and do it as collectively as possible, both to share the cost of it, but also to share the benefits of it. And so it's kind of driven by the physics and the complexity, but there's a certain purity and a beauty to that. And the result that we're doing it internationally and collectively, I think, is a really good one. And I hope that we can prolong that as long as possible and not turn it into just a purely competitive or a one-shot deal or a kind of a thoughtless, selfish way of exploring the universe. I really like the way we're doing it as a species right now, and I want to help prolong that.
What is it that we are learning now on this space station that is preparing us for future exploration further beyond Earth orbit?
On the space station, let's look at something really simple, a pump. Little pump that has to move water around, like the pump in your radiator or in your car. Well, pumps have liquid in there, and the pump spins and it moves the liquid through. Well, without gravity, the liquid doesn't stay in the bottom part of the pipe. It will stick to the walls of the pipe, and the pump will just be kind of spinning and moving air through the middle. So a pump doesn't work in space. You need to redesign it. And then once you've redesigned it, it doesn't cool itself normally because heat doesn't rise. So how do you keep your pump from overheating? Seems trivial and simple, but you have to solve that problem. How do you build a space pump? How do you build a space fan? How do you build a space computer, a space toilet, a space everything? And how do you make sure that it's going to work? Because if you say, let's go to the asteroid belt, whatever. Let's go to the biggest rock in the asteroid belt. Okay, and now our spaceship needs pumps. Well, if you launch from Earth and you start leaving Earth and you find out that you had a bad idea how to build pumps, then you can't just turn around and come home, and you're fundamentally flawed. You need to test those somewhere. And you can't test things perfectly here on the surface of the Earth because you can't escape gravity and the effects of gravity. So the space station is the test bed for the spaceships of the future. And just by its very nature, we're learning what works and what doesn't work. How to collect solar energy from the sun and make it power and cool a spaceship. How to, what thrusters, what fuel should you use? How do you have your thrusters work? What material do you build your spaceship from? If you know you're going to get peppered by micrometeorites and ultraviolet energy from the sun and radiation from the universe, what do you build it out of? And we are experimenting deliberately and just by de facto, just by being there with all of those things on the space station. And it is our big proving ground. It's our test track for building spaceships in the future. And it is therefore the diving board, the launching board, that's going to allow us to confidently go further away from Earth.